Welcome to the 17th episode of Tokyo Alumni Podcast. Today, our guest graduated from Shanghai American School in 2006, but he did attend an international school in Tokyo, ASIJ, from 2003 to 2005. Upon graduating, he went to HEC Montreal, where he earned his bachelor's in business administration. He started his career at ANZ Bank, working as a front office assistant for the market division. After a year, he managed to move to a front office role as a junior trader on the precious metals desk. He subsequently moved to their London office. So he was in Singapore and moved to London, where he became responsible for their Ford's business. He has now moved to the buy side and is working for Coke Supply and Trading as a prop precious metals trader. To kickstart his professional career, he was able to leverage on the opportunities of growing up as a TCK, a third culture kid. Not only did it open him doors at the start of his career, but it also has enabled him to be flexible and be a natural fit within multicultural teams. He has been living in London since 2012 and now enjoys discovering the UK as well as new European cities for holidays. Welcome to the podcast, Benjamin.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for having me over.
So good to see you. It's been a while. Right now you are in London, and are you guys still in lockdown?
Yeah, so we've been in official lockdown since March 23rd. I've been in lockdown myself and my wife since earlier in March. It was pretty intense in the beginning. It was full lockdown, not going out, not going out to do grocery shopping, getting everything delivered. It is getting slightly better at the moment, but we're still in full lockdown.
Yeah, that's insane to think it's already mid-June. I read somewhere yesterday how UV rays might be one of the ways that it kills the virus, which is why it's less prevalent outdoors than indoors. So who knows? Maybe with the summer, things will improve.
That'd be good. Or at least if they can find a vaccine, that'd be. Until we find a vaccine, I think the new normal will be people being 2 meters away from each other.
Today you join us from London and been sort of an international school veteran, per se, with all the places you've been to, not only American schools, but you were at the French school, I believe, in Shanghai.
Yeah.
And
the international school in Shanghai also, and the American school in Shanghai also. So I've gone through the whole panel of schools. And
yeah, that must have been crazy too. You mentioned when you were off air, when you were at ASIJ, prior to going to ASIJ, you were at a French-speaking school, and then the next second you were at an English-speaking school.
So the way it happened is we moved to Shanghai in '95. Shanghai in '95 was very different to Shanghai today. If you look at Pudong, if you can see that image of Pudong with the big towers, there's only one tower. It was a TV tower. That's it, and everything around it were rice fields. And back then there was only one international school, Shanghai International School, SIS, which I attended. Get there, I had never spoken a word of English in my life. I was the only French person in the class. If I ever wanted to go back to France, I would need the French baccalaureate. Middle school was the easiest way of, transitioning to a French system. So I did that for 2 years before we moved to Japan. And actually, I really didn't like it. The French learning system is very different to English or American. It's much more strict and rigid. It's a lot of memorizing, and it's very different. So we moved to Japan. I visited a few schools in Tokyo before decided where I would go. And when I visited ASIJ, the campus was just wow. It is probably one of the most impressive schools I've ever seen in my life. Visited the campus, met different teachers and counselors, and I just thought it was the best place to be and to go. And I loved it. I think it was just an amazing school. Went to SAS and continued on my APs and graduated from Shanghai American School, where most people stay, which cycles of 3 or 4 years in the same location, I guess. Or back then, that's how it was. So you make friendship and bonds, and you're used to seeing new faces arrive, old faces go, and then you move and you make new people, and you create quite a big network of friendships and bonds, which is quite interesting.
So many people come and go, and you were mentioning also off air how it's just like if you talk to someone you haven't spoken to for 10, 20 years, it's still things pick up right away because people are sort of used to that, the ephemeralness of, how long they know each other in high school. I remember you were part of the European gang.
Yes, there was a few of us hanging in the entrance of ASIJ. I remember the little corridor on the left when you entered the school and all those little couches. But it was, there was a beauty of ASIJ. We had students from everywhere around the world, and we were a couple of Europeans, and it was quite fun.
I mean, it's hard for me to imagine any school in the world where you just kind of walk by, there's 5 students, and it was like a Bulgarian, a Swede, French, English, Italian, yeah. Matteo Peo.
Exactly. So, it was quite a nice, diverse mix. But then again, the rest of the school was also quite diverse, which was quite nice. And
yeah, it's definitely sort of its own little world, which I learned to appreciate, especially when I went to the States, where everything was very much, the Hispanic kids hang out with Hispanic kids, and Black kids hang out with Black kids, and Asian kids hang out with Asian kids. And to me, it was like a cultural shock being in the U.S. And you mentioned a bit about in your biography how being a TCK has helped you, work in your current industry, as well as, work in these multicultural groups. So how specifically would you describe your TCK background affecting your current line of work?
So I've got a couple of funny stories, but if we go chronologically. So after graduating from HEC in Montreal and getting my bachelor, I actually did not know what I wanted to do. I remember my last year at college, all the banks coming and recruiting, and every bank would come in and say, look, guys, we have 2 or 3 openings this year for the whole of Canada. Either you're the best of the best and you have 20 activities behind you and you've done years of internship, it's not worth applying. I was not the best of the best, but I had something different. I had international background. And so I knew that going through getting into the industry, the conventional way was going to be complicated. So I found an internship in Shanghai, actually. It was going to be an internship that would turn into a job, and I was going to work for a French bank and M&A. And so, I know exactly, well, it was on Thursday. I was Thursday in Montreal. The bank called me and said, can you start next Thursday? I said, okay, well, no worries. I'm graduating tomorrow. On my way to Shanghai, I stopped in Thailand for 2-3 days because my family lives in Thailand. I met someone who I call my guardian angel now. He took a look at my CV and he said, look, it's crazy. You've lived in China, you've lived in Japan, done internships in Taiwan, you studied in Canada, you're French, you have this baggage that a lot of people your age don't have. I said, so just let me keep your CV. You go to Shanghai, do your internship, do whatever you want, but you have a story that a lot of people don't have. And you can say things that a lot of people don't have. And most importantly, I'm pretty sure that I can throw you in a team with people coming from all around the world, and you'll be able to adapt and adjust because culturally you'll know how to behave. Interestingly, that's what happened in my first internship in Shanghai. So I go to this bank in Shanghai, French bank, very small bank. I arrive on the first day of work. The receptionist says, please go in that office and then someone will come pick you up. And they made me wait for 3 hours. No one came, 3 hours. At some point I'd go back. I said, look, what's going on? And so, sorry, the MD is very busy. Just go and get a desk and sit at a desk. It was just horrible. It was just a very bad experience. So, fast forward, second, third day, I talk to the MD. The MD says, I'm sorry, I'm too busy at the moment. But there are a few files in the corner. Just read a few of the projects we've worked on and start understanding what we do. So I read projects, and in the meantime, I get a call from ANZ, or I get a call from someone in Singapore for this front office support role. And the person tells me, look, we're a multicultural team. We're here to help all the traders and solve all their IT problems, position problems, system problems, queries they may have. You're there to help everyone and anyone. And I thought it was very interesting. And I called my guardian angel. He said, look, I've made you apply for this job, and your goal is, that's your way in the bank. You need to find a way. You need to find a different way in, because once you're inside, it's easier to move forward. So I did the interviews, and the first interview, the first question the person said is, in my team, I'm Australian. There's a French person. There's Singaporeans. There's a Malaysian. The traders come from all around the world. How are you going to be able to fit in? And I said, well, perfect. That's exactly how I fit in. I told him, I said, look, I've lived in China. I've lived in Montreal. I've lived multiple places. I've been in cities where I don't understand what people say at first. I've been in cities where I understand what people say. I said, that's exactly how. That's easy. I said, you're putting me in a very simple situation, actually. And he enjoyed that. And he actually told me, consider the job, and that I had the job if I wanted to. Going back to Shanghai, on that end of that first week, the MD comes to me and says, we're working on a big project. The MD, as a side note, was French, who had just moved to China. No experience about China or the Chinese culture. And he comes to me and says, look, we're working on a project. There's a big M&A firm and project going on. I'm going to go to the meeting, and I'm going to show them that we're the best. We know everything. And, we're going to put them down and show them that we're stronger than everyone else. And that's when my TCK hat kicked in. I said, and Chinese experience said, China is all about guanxi, and something important culturally is you never make them feel lesser, or you never put them down. Because in the Chinese culture, if you do that, you'll never work with them. It just doesn't work. And he kept on saying, no, but that's not how we do it. That's not how we do it in France. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but first of all, I'm resigning because I found a great job, which I think is a much better fit. But you're missing the point. And, this whole cultural aspect of our jobs is much more important. And, you're in China, it's a different culture, different type of people, different ways of doing business. And if you don't learn and accept, then you'll never be successful. So that was one of the first, the first two reasons why being with TCK and having had that experience was a very big advantage for me. And then, moved to Singapore, worked for an NZ Bank in this multicultural environment. Had no problem of jumping from French to English and working with a Chinese person, and people loved it because you were able to adapt and mingle and just be part of a team very quickly. Also, once afterwards, I moved to junior trader in Singapore, and a lot of our clients were Chinese banks. That was actually the best thing in the world because I did a few business trips to Shanghai and Beijing, and you go there, you go to a meeting. I was with my Shanghainese salesperson, and you've got a big meeting. The salesperson does his pitch in Chinese, and they see me who doesn't look Chinese at all. And at the end, the salesperson said, "Oh, Ben, can you talk about gold?" And I start talking in Chinese. And you can see the whole room everyone just stops. And everyone says, "Who is that kid? What is he doing? And how does he understand? First of all, how does he speak Chinese? And the customs and the way we do business. And how do you give a business card in Asia? It's very different to how you give a business card in North America. And all that. And it was amazing. It was just an amazing experience. And
that's a great story too. When you said how they were putting you in this multicultural team, and they were like, "How are you going to work with this?" And you were like, "Well,
that's what I do."
Yeah, like it would be the reverse. It'd be probably an issue for you. It wasn't the multi. There's actually a grad from ASIJ, I think '99, who wrote a book about bilingual versus bicultural, and what you say seems to really resonate with the bicultural part. And that was essentially his thesis, was that there's plenty of people around the world nowadays, right? With 7 billion people on the planet, you can find hundreds of millions of people who can speak, English and Chinese well, or French and Chinese well. But when it comes to like the cultures, understanding that there's so much nuance to it, and it's sometimes not something that you can just read through a book, right? Sometimes it's actually something you need through life experience. And that sounds like, something that you had. And I guess going along those ideas, a sort of question I would have for you in regards to, so that your, people around you, et cetera. So you've spoken about much the business side of things. When it comes to personal side of things, do you ever find yourself sort of surrounding yourself with a very multicultural group? Did you find other TCKs throughout, your personal life, throughout your career? How did that all work out?
For sure I did. Well, that's how I chose my college, first of all. Canada, if you're French, has a very big advantage is because it doesn't cost you anything. Right? So I went to college and I think it cost me $1,000 every 6 months. So it was very cheap. And most importantly, my bachelor was in 3 languages. So third was in Spanish, third in English, third in French. And everyone came from all around the world. So I've always looked to be with people that have traveled and lived in other places. Then I went to Singapore, and same thing. We were quite a multicultural group of friends. To be honest, London is a bit different. I find it harder here to have the same type of mix and experience. Although my wife is Greek Australian, we've got French friends, we've got Greek friends, we've got Australian friends. But it is English friends, of course, but it is quite different. It's not big in Europe. I find it very different to that accessibility of multiculturalism that you would have in Asia.
That's really intriguing. Yeah, it does sound like parts of the U.S., how ironically you have very heterogeneous areas, but because they're so heterogeneous, that means there's so much of, one ethnic population, and then everyone just ends up flocking together, living together. And there are these communities, which is great on one hand, but on the other hand, it does discourage sort of this multicultural hubs to be created that maybe you would see in places like Singapore. Your current occupation, precious metals trader, what does that mean? What exactly is a precious metal?
So I trade gold, silver, platinum, and palladium for coke. It's all about looking for inefficiencies in the markets. So gold is used as an investment tool. You have some industrial usage of gold. You've got some mines and producers that need to dig gold out of the ground and use it, and need to hedge their price risk. You've got jewelry, so there's a big demand side. You've got some very strong traditional buyers of gold around the world, like the Indians who use gold as wedding gift and as a way of storing wealth. China's become a very big buyer of gold also. In China, you also have the whole, not just in China, in a big part of the world, you have the whole way of seeing gold as a way to save your money or protect your assets, especially when you have a currency that's not as stable as in some of the other developed nations. So what do? I focus a lot on finding inefficiencies in the market. So you have several local gold markets around the world. You have a big gold market in London. New York is a very big gold market. You've got India, you've got China, you've got Japan, to make it simple. And each of those markets have different actors and market participants. And they each buy and sell gold for a different reason and differently. So I focus a lot on, to some extent, supply and demand, if you want to simplify it, and trying to source gold in places where gold is cheap, and then move it to places where gold is in more demand and more expensive. So, for example, one of the biggest difference there is the price of gold between London and New York. New York is much more investors, hedge funds, that type of community that transact in the New York gold market. London is more of a central place of gold. It's the base. It's where all the physical market happens. All the producers, that's where they hedge their gold. And so you've got a difference in price between those two locations. And my job is to find ways of monetizing that. So buying gold in London, shipping it in New York, and capturing that price difference.
Interesting. So when it comes to gold in the States, you mentioned the New York market. Obviously, COVID has just thrown a wrench into all the wrenches into the tires. And how has COVID affected the markets, especially in the U.S., but also worldwide? Do you see this event itself having any long-term effects? The way when IMF crash happened in Korea, Koreans started buying gold. Japan's economy when the bubble bursted, I think it was 90 or 91, people started buying more gold. Are we going to see those kind of long-term effects due to COVID?
Yes, I think it's actually very appropriate. I've actually never been so busy. COVID has been the busiest time of my life at work. As you said, the world stopped working and moving forward. And I trade a lot of the price of gold in different locations. So to give you an example, the price difference between London and New York is usually roughly $1. On March 23rd or 24th, when planes stopped working and the world came to a stop, the price difference went to $85.
Wow, 85 more in New York?
More. Yes, New York was $85 more than London, when usually it's $1, maybe $2 different. So, the whole market just came to a halt. My job back then was to find a way to still ship gold from London to New York, find solutions, because that arb had blown up. The market only works when that market is efficient, because otherwise prices are too different, that people are unable to hedge their risk, and they think people usually look to buy gold in New York thinking it was the same thing as gold in London, because the price was usually very similar. And now they find the price difference is $85. And they say, well, actually, this is not the same market. It's not the same gold. It's not the same type. And how do I hedge my exposures? So I've been working a lot on that. I've been, finding ways of shipping gold around the world, which is actually quite simple. It's by plane. And then, being able to source gold around the world, physical gold, to ship it to New York, because it was very expensive. We shipped gold from Australia, where it was quite cheap. We shipped gold from Switzerland, where it was quite cheap. And it's all about removing those inefficiencies, bringing that service to the market, of improving how the different flows go. Because having something that's usually worth $1 now worth $85 is not efficient for anyone. It doesn't help. This is what we focus on. It's on the physical aspect afterwards. And
another interesting sort of concept I was reading relevant to, the buying and selling of gold, was Bitcoin has sort of reemerged, right, in the last few months. People have sort of often drawn parallels with the two, even though they're so different, right, in regards to, quite literally, one is a physical entity and the other is not. In your industry, do you guys ever talk much about Bitcoin?
I like Bitcoin. I thought it was a nice little tool 2 or 3 winters ago when it was all in fashion. There are stories of people saying that, they, instead of using gold as a safe haven, they put money in Bitcoin instead, because they thought that it was even more secure than gold. I'm not sure I agree, because gold, ultimately, it's a physical thing. It's a physical bar. It's recognizable all around the world. But, I think Bitcoin is, for me, it's interesting the same way that it's quite inefficient. The price of Bitcoin is quite different around the world, around different exchanges. They have different prices. And that's the angle that I enjoy about Bitcoin. Otherwise, I don't know. Will Bitcoin have a future? Of course. I think it's becoming more mainstream and more accepted. Will it replace gold as a safe haven? I don't think so. Not for now. But it is quite fun. It's quite a nice niche way. And also, the difference. So, as I say, gold is a great way for people that live in unstable currencies to safeguard their assets. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is similar, and it's also very good money to get money out of those countries. There's a big story of, in China, it's hard to export your money, to bring the money out of the country. There are big stories of people buying Bitcoins and selling them in different countries and finding a way to export their wealth, which I think is the reason why Bitcoin was so popular at the start. It's becoming tougher, but certainly at the start, it was a way of...
So yeah, you've been in this business for a bit now. You've been trading precious metals. And what would be one point of advice you would give towards someone who is considering trading within the precious metals market?
My advice would be to be very careful, especially if you're a new investor. Careful of the type of gold you're buying, because not all investment vehicles are the same, and they don't allow you to do the same, to achieve the same goal and protect you the same way. What I mean is, if you're going to buy physical coins, physical coins come at a very big can come at a very big premium over the normal price of gold. You need to make sure that, if it's for an investment purpose, that you're able to resell those coins. You need to do your research on finding out, if you want to resell it, will the new buyer buy it at the same premium, or will they buy it at a discount, or at the same price? ETFs, you have to be quite careful of if you're using that vehicle. Why are you buying gold? Are you buying gold because you're scared of it's the end of the world and you need to protect yourself? Then in that case, maybe you need to buy an ETF that has physical gold as a backing and not just paper gold. Also seeing how liquid that ETF is, because maybe you're buying in a very cheap ETF, and it's cheap because there's not many people that own it, so it's not very liquid. And when you need to get out, are you able to get out?
So I didn't mean to interrupt, but with ETFs, when you say low volume, ones that are harder to, perhaps might be hard to liquidate, is there a certain, not really a price point, but like a volume point where you feel like once a certain volume is achieved, that is a safer bet, or once it doesn't exceed a certain amount, that it might be a slightly riskier ETF?
I'm not sure if there's a hard point, but I think there are probably 30 or 40 or 50 plus gold ETFs around the world, and majority of the money is in the top 10 of them. So any of those top 10 ETF, there's relatively lower risk. But if you're in a very small ETF that only has a few $100 million worth of metal, it will just be harder to liquidate.
As we see more and more people investing, not just in gold, but investments in general, obviously the platforms for trading has become much more conducive to the millennial generation, right? It's just you can use your cell phone. Sure. Like I have my Robinhood. Has that affected your trading as well? Is it just much more in regards to the volume of trades, especially at the smaller scales?
Yes, for sure. One of the good example is if you look at the Chinese market. Investing in China has become easier over the past several years, and the impact of the Chinese population has increased dramatically. It's actually quite funny. When I went to Shanghai, it probably was 8 years ago now, and I was in the taxi going from the airport, and my taxi driver, which in Shanghai is, in terms of life ranking, taxi driver is, not the person that makes the most. And he was extremely busy buying and selling gold on his iPad. And I just could not believe it. First of all, taxi driver having an iPad, investing in gold in Shanghai. For me, compared to the image of Shanghai I had in my mind, it was just crazy. But it shows also, this whole new wealth and whole new generation. And yes, they certainly have a very big impact on price. And it's very much like a big herd, for some reason, they all start buying at the same time. And you can see them drive up prices, and they usually get out at the same time. And, it sells, flash crashes very quickly. It is a very big source of money, very big source of wealth. And they certainly have a very big impact now on prices.
That's absolutely fascinating. So taxi drivers, Shanghai,
buying and selling gold. I just could not believe it. It was so funny. It was just, And I could see him on his iPad, and we were driving in Shanghai traffic, and we were talking about investing in gold, and he was like, "Yeah, that's how I do it," and boom, 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 and on his little app. And also culturally, it's quite interesting. In the Western world, negative numbers are in red. In China, positive numbers are in red. So when you see stock markets or photos or images in the Western media of the Chinese markets, and you see a board full of red numbers, it means that the market in China is having a very good day.
Well, what color do they use when things are bad?
Green. Red and green.
That's great, yeah.
So I remember the app was all red, and it's very, culturally very different. It was very funny. And
that's just a fascinating thing about the colors and Shanghai and taxi drivers trading. So that's the era we live in, huh? 2020.
It's very different. I mean, if you compare it to China in 95, it was a completely different.
So as we wrap up this conversation, at the end, I like to hand over the mic figuratively to the guest and ask them what is coming up in their lives for the next few months, next few years, maybe even the next few decades, if they've thought that far. I have not. So, so Benjamin, the mic is yours. If you can just talk to us about a minute or two, what is to come?
Yeah, I haven't thought about the next 10 years. At the moment, I'm thinking mainly about getting out of COVID and being able to get out of my house and go to a restaurant. Being able to watch football in a stadium also, that's something I miss a lot. No, I think at the moment it's one step at a time, making sure that coronavirus, it's going to remain, with society, but being able to live with it in a much more efficient way, staying safe. No, there's no next few years. I think I'll still be living here. I think I'll probably still be trading gold. It is a very exciting times. It's very challenging times. But most importantly, I really like your podcast. And I think there's a very important message that I really want to push through is this TCK and this special bond that we're able to make and this high value. And, if you have any new alumni or future alumni of those international schools, it's for them to understand the value of it and how you're able to leverage upon it. And also to know that if you meet someone that's had a similar life, even if it was a completely different part of the world or different schools, just know that people usually think in a similar way, and you're able to create those bonds and friendships and work much more efficiently. And also it allows you to move around the world, in a heartbeat. You're able to be told that, you're moving to Shanghai next week, and then at some point you're moving to Singapore and London, and you're not shocked. And it's something for you easy to adapt, and it's something very valuable in this new world, I think, of a very global world, and being able to have that flexibility.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that you think this podcast is a good idea. I know our viewership's not big, but as I keep telling people, it's an important group, when it's 100, 200 people, but it's 100, 200 usually other alums. And it's great to have this network continuing. And
for me, it's been fun. It's been fun. I've seen faces of people that I had not seen in 15, 20 years now. It's very fun and very impressive to see how we've all evolved, and all the stories I've seen are just people doing really cool jobs and cool stuff.
Yeah, I agree. It's been very inspiring for me, probably is the key word. Just I've been inspired by all the work everyone does. And I could see in the background, you're complaining about the weather in England, but it looks quite blue. So
it's getting sunny, you see. It's perfect for the podcast. We went from the gray to a blue sky and nice sunshine. So you see, it never rains in the UK. It's fake news.
I don't know if I believe that, but it was great having you on air.
Thank you.
17th episode. And I'll, again, as you said, it could be Singapore, Shanghai. I'm sure our paths will cross somewhere in the world.
Yeah, for sure. If you come to London, give me a call, send me a message, and we'll have a drink and watch some football for sure.
Sounds good. It was nice seeing you.
Perfect. And, nice seeing you, Nick. Congrats again.
Bye, Ben.
It's really good. See ya. Have a nice day. Enjoy your Sunday.